Word First Radio.
Hey, what's up, you guys? Welcome to Word First Radio, the podcast brought to you by Word First Ministries. I am your host, Jacob O'Neill, and as always, I'm joined by my friend Cameron.
Hey.
And today, we are joined once again by our wonderful friend, Ann Kristin.
Woo,
Welcome
hey.
back.
Thank you. It's really nice to be back.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I believe you when you say that. It's nice to have you back.
Yeah.
We love having you here.
Yes.
How are you excited?
Yeah, I am. I think this is going to be really good. Yeah.
I'll tell you why I'm excited, because we're going into the next section of Store Spørsmål, Korte Svar today.
Woohoo.
It's going to be really good. And this is actually the section, I don't know if I'm most excited to talk about, but it's a really important topic that we've talked about on the show before. It's actually about evil, the problem of evil.
Yeah.
The Norwegian word for evil is ondskap, which we talked about before. How would we translate that into English? Because there's ondskap and onde. Yeah. And ondskap, Cam came up with the translation evilness.
Yeah. Well, in English, with the adjective and the noun form are the same. We say something is evil. We say evil is evil.
Right.
Yeah. But ondskap is like evilness, but we don't have evil. Yeah.
The vibe of evil, I guess.
I think the existence.
Yeah, sure. I just got you. I'm just trying to get it on the table.
Yeah.
Anyways, and so this chapter is not very long, which I mean I don't blame her for, because the problem of evil is a question people have been struggling with for a very long time.
Yeah.
People have written, there are literally countless books and pages and papers and philosophers who have discussed this problem and wrestled with it.
Yeah.
Not all of them are skeptics, atheists. So most of them, the vast majority of them, have been believers struggling with the problem of evil. And that's not that doesn't surprise me, because it's a real problem. It's a problem that touches all of our lives in some way.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't surprise me that people have raised these questions to her, especially middle schoolers, and they want an answer. And so we're going to go through all a few chapters that there are and talk about the things about it that we think are really good, and maybe some constructive feedback, because I think there are a few places where in what shines is what I'm going to call a foundational theological difference that is very important. It's foundational. So
yeah, we end up having some differences of opinion that by the time our opinions are different, or by the time the thought is way out here, it doesn't sound very much different, but what Kari has to say implies or follows from a different understanding of something that's foundational important.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're going to jump right into it. So let's jump right into the first question here. So it says, why doesn't God do anything about what I pray for? Why do I pray for someone or a family member to not die, but they die anyways?
Yeah.
I tell you, that's a question I could see myself asking at 12 or 13 in middle school. Ann Kristin, how about we just pass it over to you to get us started? What do you think of her answer?
Yeah, like I think her answer to this is good. And how she is beginning with meeting the people first, then answering. I think that's a really good way to meet the questions, that she just doesn't like begin on the theology stuff behind it, but like see the people that is asking the questions. So I think that's really good. And that she also that she says that we don't know why God doesn't do all we ask for, or stuff like that. Like when it's something that is hard and we don't understand, like she says, like we're not God and we don't know it. And sometimes we wish that God would do exactly what we ask for, but he don't. So I feel that's good. And also how she's saying that, but we should still pray, even though we feel like it's not working right here, right now. We should pray and then maybe see something after or stuff like that. Or also pray for our peace. And but I feel like she says like, okay, we should pray because it can be good for us. And that's true. But she doesn't mention anything about like that. It is power in prayer.
Right.
And that's also a reason why we should pray. She's more like, oh, because you maybe feel better after you have prayed for it and stuff like that. And of course, that's one side of prayer, but as a Christian, I also believe it has something to say if I pray or not.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think I agree with all of that. I think what's really wonderful about Kari's answer is it's very pastoral, and I think it's a good counterbalance to the way I would be inclined to answer the question. I would want to start with solving the logical problem, like how do we solve the math,
Right?
And she starts with, I don't know who asked the question. I don't know what you're going through, but talk to somebody who can support you and who can help. And she talks about, it makes I think a really true and beautiful case for prayer being something that's available for comfort, and God will comfort you even. So now God didn't save or didn't keep alive the person you were praying for, but then he meets you in your grief and can support and comfort you. And prayer is a means of relating to God in that way. And I think she's absolutely right about that too. But to Ann Kristin's point, there isn't the further sense that God can do anything about it. So I like the faithful aspect that says, listen, we don't understand why God does or doesn't do all of the stuff that he's up to. And I think that charitably interpreted can be a call to God's in charge, and he loves you, and he knows what's good for you, and he loves the person you were praying for, knows what's good for them. And sometimes those questions about why he does or doesn't respond the way we would expect him to in prayer, those are in the heart and mind of God, but we can trust his goodness through those things. So I think I can take her to be meaning all of that, but then sort of disappointingly stops short of saying, but God does care about what you pray for, and don't stop. And prayer is not merely a means of feeling comfort when we're grieving or comfort when we're suffering, but that God hears and responds to and cares about our prayers and the requests that we make of him.
Yeah, really good. I don't have so much more to add. I do think the note she ends on has like, oh my gosh, it's almost like a glim. I don't want to say a glimmer because it's a little better than a glimmer, but it's like, yes, this is a good point. And it's not the whole point. This is a good point to say. And what she says is that death is not the last word. So like, okay, well, in our church, we believe that death isn't the last word, and that people when they die, they believe in God, and God, receives them, and God takes care of them.
There's a hope for life in God's eternal family.
Yeah.
And I think one of the ways that the Apostle Paul responds to this problem is God's grace is sufficient.
Yeah.
Right. So what do I need for this life is God's grace, and everything else is extra and bonus.
Yeah.
And he understands and tries to convey the bigness and the sort of all-encompassing relevance of the truth of God's grace, and helps to reframe our focus. So it's easy to, in our world, look at what God's not giving me and look at the things that are difficult. So I guess all of that is to say, I really appreciate Kari taking the time to explain that we still have access to God, and he will meet us in our suffering and offers us comfort in our prayer. But like you said, Jacob, it's almost there. It's like death is not the final word. I'm like, yes, but what is the final word?
Right. Well, she says God receives them, but I would have thought like, man, this is a great opportunity to be like, no, here's the gospel. Proclaim it to the person you're talking to. Like, it's not like, this is not a happy thing just to make us feel better, right? About like, well, God didn't answer our prayers, but I mean, that's okay because they go to heaven. Like, no. Here's the gospel. This is true. We have an actual hope. This is not, we know that death isn't the end. We know we're going to see them again. We know that very recently, Cameron, we had somebody that we had known who had passed away recently. Someone we cared about.
Yeah.
You'd known him longer than I did, a lot longer. We prayed for him to get better.
Yeah.
And he was a Christian. He knew the Lord. And the thing is that in the midst of this, his family is grieving right now. We care for them. We love them. We're reaching out as much as we can. But to see their faith in the midst of this, when I talk to his son and he tells me, he's like, no, I'm gonna see my dad again. There's no we do not live in a universe where the last time I met my dad was the day of his death. I'm gonna see him again. It hurts right now. It hurts really, really bad. But God is real, God is good, and because of the power of the gospel and the resurrection, I am going to see my dad again with something we're looking forward to. That's something I know is going to happen because Jesus rose from the dead.
Yeah.
And so that's why I was saying like, oh, it's half the point. Like I hope we can feel the difference in like what I just said and versus what we read, because that's an actual hope. That's not wishful thinking.
Right. Well, there is a method of achieving comfort and peace in prayer, something like that. Yes, prayer is
absolutely. Yeah.
I don't mean to sound vulgar about it, but prayer is like a powerful tool that can be brought to bear against your grief and suffering, and that's true. But also, I can endure this grief and suffering because this life is not the end, and because the gospel is true, and because there's eternal life with God and among His people. Then the sufferings and trappings of this world are dwarfed in comparison to the glory that we can expect for the rest of our eternities.
Yeah, that's good. You should write that down because that's in the Bible. But yes, very good. I mean, I think that's about it for that chapter. I mean, basically really good, and I think for the most part good. Yeah. And I think there was just a couple beats along the way that could have been a little more bold or a little more like, hey, listen, this is true for you. You're gonna have actual hope because of the gospel.
Have you ever, when you were a kid, Jacob, did you ever go swimming with a friend and you're like, okay, we're gonna run in the pool and we're both gonna do a cannonball, and you run and then your friend stops and you're the only one who jumps in?
Yeah,
it felt a little bit like that.
A little bit.
Like, I'm running. I was like, okay, and then we get so close, and it feels like she kind of stops, and I'm looking behind, going, why are you doing this with me?
Yeah,
this is the best part is coming up.
Yeah, no, really good. That's a really good analogy. That explains how I felt. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So it is. I'm gonna need your help translating this. Actually, Ann Kristin, just trying to do it on the fly. So, how is God be both? How can God be both all powerful and loving?
Yeah.
Charlie? Okay, and loving. When so many.
When it
hurtful
is,
things,
when it is so much evil.
When there's a lot of evil happens in the world, yes. A couple, because I'm still learning Norwegian. There's just words in there that wouldn't strike me as like what to say if I was trying to say that, but that's okay because I'm learning how to say it in Norwegian. So if God is both loving and all powerful, why do so many evil things happen in the world?
Yeah,
that's like the question.
That's the question,
isn't it?
Yeah.
Cam, can I just hand this to you? Not to answer the question, but
oh gosh, I was going to do the philosophy.
I know. To talk about her answer, because if I just start talking about her answer, I'm going to talk about like the one thing in this that like really did not sit well with me, to be honest.
Yeah,
it didn't sit well with me at all. But we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But why don't you talk about her answer? What do you think of her answer?
I'll do my best. I think it was as another case of being mostly good, and I have a lot to learn from it as somebody who tends to want to solve the mathematical problem, and not take the pastoral thing. Not that I don't take it seriously, but my first instinct is not pastoral. It's it's like to be an engineer instead of a pastor. So I appreciate that, and that is the question. You know, the Christians who we tell the world this crazy thing about the existence of a God who is all powerful. There's no doable thing that God can't do, and He's also all loving, and He cares for us, and He's in charge, and that He cares, and He could do whatever He wanted to do in the universe, and has limitless power. But it looks like there's a lot of stuff. There's stuff going on in the universe that if I had the power to stop it, I would. And so, why isn't God stopping these things? That is an important. That's an important question, and one that I think that we need to take seriously. And I wonder, I don't know how much more I have to say about her answer that isn't the thing that you also want to talk about.
Sure.
Yeah, I can say something else.
Okay, good.
Because I feel she's answering it in one way, that the Bible is talking about it, and that Jesus felt those things and stuff like that. And I feel that's a good point, but I wouldn't say that's like the main point of answering the question of evil in the world. Because here she just says that it is there, and the Bible talks about it.
Yeah, and God is with us. So
Yeah.
yes, it's there. The Bible talks about it. Jesus is not is not spared suffering, but God is with us in the midst of our suffering.
Yeah.
And that's true, but it kind of doesn't answer the question.
No, because she doesn't even mention sin. Like, I feel like that's the problem. That's the root of all evil. The sin in us and that. And then you don't get, or if you don't mention the sin, like you don't get this free will in the picture, and that God does it because he loves us. He wants to love us and that we shall love him, but to have this love, like it ain't love if we have to do something, then it's not love, but we have to choose it. And like, and she doesn't mention anything about it, and I feel that's like a huge mistake here. Like, she's talking about like 1% of what the question actually is about.
Yeah, I think it's a very important point to say something about God's posture, how God feels about evil, that is evil in the world. And we can say that God hates it too, and that God demands justice, and that's powerfully testified in all of scriptures about God's demand for justice, and he's so holy that his eyes cannot look upon injustice. So like, that's important.
Yeah, it's important.
And it's true that there's a sense in which God suffers with us. God looks at the terrible suffering that if I had the power, would want to end. God looks at that and hates it even more than I do, and is hurt by it more than I am. And so yes, all of that is important to say, but I think there's so much more to say about the question, because it's about the character of God. And to say the question, I think if I was going to restate it, something like, why doesn't your God if he's so good and he's able to, why doesn't he put an end to some of this terrible suffering? One part of the answer is, well, he meets us in our suffering and he offers us comfort, and God suffers with us. God suffers with us, and he doesn't promise us that we're going to have a life without suffering. But the question is like, but then what is God like? Like, what does that say about his character? Why doesn't he stop the suffering? He suffers with us, and it really grieves him too. Okay, but why doesn't he stop it? If it grieves him, that's the point. That kind of restates the question. It's like, that's the point. If it grieves him, why doesn't he stop it?
Sure.
Yeah.
No, very good. Okay, so getting to this part, because Ann Kristin and Cam have been very kind to me, and I've only talked about like the first two paragraphs really, and about what they think is not in the rest of the section or this question. And so in the last paragraph, she says something that I take really strong objection to, and I kind of wish the sentence wasn't here. So I'm going to read it, and then we're going to talk about it. So she says, God is all-powerful, but also powerless. That means that we find things, or there are things, that God can't do anything with, or can't do anything about. Or because I'm trying to translate. It means there are things that God can't do anything about. So I took really sharp objection to that, because it really, I want to say offends. I'm not offended, but it goes against a lot of the things that, like my sensibilities, like a lot of things I take really seriously about God's sovereignty and suffering, and really what I think is the real main issue here. So
for me, it flew in from nowhere. You have what is kind of a beautiful, incomplete, but sort of beautiful answer about God meeting us and suffering with us in a certain way, and he doesn't withhold suffering even from Jesus. And then we all of a sudden get this one sentence that God is almighty and he's also powerless, and that means there's some things God can't do anything about.
Yeah, that's
true.
Whoa,
where did that come from?
That's true. It does kind of just fly in there, doesn't it? Like it kind of just is put in there.
But there's no further explanation. Why can't he do anything about these things? You just said he's all powerful and powerless.
Yeah.
What does that mean? You just stated a contradiction and then said that that means there's some stuff God can't do.
Yeah. And I mean, there, in the strict, like getting rid of the pastoral sense of it for a second, because that's kind of the track I want to go on as we talk about this further. But I mean, there are things God can't do. Like he
Sure.
can't make a square circle. He can't he can't force somebody to love him, right?
be
We
a
talked
married
about that.
bachelor.
Or a married bachelor, or make the color blue smell like 3.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's there are things God can't do. The scriptures say God can't lie and God
Mm-hmm.
can't sin. And God can't turn away from evil, as Cameron just kind of talked about. And so, I mean, if that's what she means, she doesn't say it, first of all. And so my kind of thing, to be charitable at the same time, she does kind of say this sentence without any explanation. I would want to ask for an explanation, but I would also kind of like ask, why even say that? Because that's just not true. There's nothing that God, there are things that God can't do anything about. I'll tell you, if that's true, that's terrible news.
Yeah.
If there are the most evil, egregious, horrible, dark events in all of human history, and you look at those and you're like, God just can't do anything about it. God can't do anything with this. That's terrible news. But the Bible doesn't teach that. The Bible teaches that God can produce good out of immense, terrible darkness. And even if it doesn't make sense to us right now, even if we don't see what God's achieving through this, I tell you, the only hope that we have is that we know that God can make good from darkness, good from evil. The crowning moment of the story of Joseph in the book of Genesis, right? Genesis 50:20. Joseph says to his brothers, who beat him up, threw him in a pit, and sold him into slavery, he says to them, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And so that shows Joseph, and by extension shows us, that God can use terrible, horrible, immense darkness and suffering and use it for good, including the good of judging and enacting right justice against sin and evil and punishing evil. That is a good that God achieves through evil and darkness. And so I just think, like, I'm just kind of shocked. And Ann Kristin, before we started recording, I was like, did I misinterpret this? Can you help me understand it? I threw it into Google Translate because I didn't want it to say what it says.
Yeah.
But I just take great offense to it because I'm just like, listen, God can do something and will do something with everything.
Yeah,
God can make good from everything.
Well, and I think we might be misinterpreting or misunderstanding, and maybe if she took some time to explain herself, we might actually agree ultimately.
Maybe.
But nevertheless, in this short explanation, those couple of sentences, they just do the work of saying, and God can't do anything about the evil, but I hope he's going to win in the end, and that's what I believe in. And I don't know, that kind of answer, I think, is the kind that would lead someone toward despair. First of all, it doesn't describe accurately who God is or what we can expect in terms of justice and setting the world right. But also, that's not a hopeful response. It's just there's some things God can't do anything about. The implication is evil in the world. If he could, he would, but he can't. He's all powerful, but he's also powerless. It means he can't do anything about that. But he's a fighting God, and I hope that in the end he's going to overcome the evil in the world. So that's what I'm hanging on to.
But think about I want to hear what you have to say as well, Ann Kristin.
I know we've been going for way too long.
I know, mostly me, and I apologize.
Well, that's what I meant.
But think about the difference between that and what I'm about to say. No, God can do and will do something about everything, and the thing he's going to do is win in the end. He's going to win in the end. And no matter how much we might not like it and how much it sucks right now, we can hold on to an actual hope and positive expectation for a future state that God will do something about everything and will win in the end. That's what he's going to do about everything. Yeah. Ann Kristin, thoughts?
Well, no, I feel the same. Like always, like when I read it, like I was thinking when I read it that she meant like he can't make a square circle,
right?
But that was probably me just wishing that she's not saying what she's saying. Because it is, that's what's is written here. And also at the end she is saying that she is hoping for, but you said she also believed, but it's not what it's standing. She's just saying that, okay, and she hopes someday that God will end it, but it doesn't seem like she's sure about it. Like, and I feel like that's what we have been through last time we talked too. Like, she's saying that, okay, this is my belief and what I think, but you can believe whatever makes you happy and stuff like that. And I feel it's really like that in this chapter, that she is saying like, this is how I think that God is, and it's good for me, and you find your own truth. And
Yeah, that was the best possible way to end that.
Well, that's how it seems to me. Is there's some things God just can't. There's all this evil, and God doesn't promise us we're not going to experience. I'm sorry. I'm giving sort of the Cam paraphrase in a way that highlights my disappointment with this answer. That is, there's this evil and it's awful, and God doesn't withhold it from people. And we see even Jesus suffering in the Bible, and God is there with him to offer him comfort in their suffering. But there are some things God just can't do anything about, but he's fighting for us. And I choose to hope that he's going to win this one. So that's how I deal with the problem, is by hoping that God is going to be powerful enough to win, but he can't do anything about it now. That's how it reads to me, and I'm like, oh man, right. I think it's false, and I think that it doesn't offer. It's false. It misses it fails to include the truth of the gospel, and I don't think like if that's not how you end that pastoral conversation.
Yeah, because that's not how like we would, like if someone was talking to us, right? Like if we were talking, if we were face to face with someone, that's definitely not, I think, how we would. And I don't say that to say like, well, she needs to answer the way that we would, because there's times where she hasn't that we thought, oh, that was good. I wouldn't have said it that way, but that was good. Yeah, right.
So, there's been some insights that I definitely can learn from. And I wouldn't have said it that way, but maybe I should have. Right? I need to incorporate that into my thinking. So
cool. Okay. Thank you guys for bearing with my rant there at the end. Not a rant, but talking about something that's important to me. But we're going to move on. The next question is, does the devil exist? Ann Kristin, how about we get your thoughts on this first? Because this was actually the one before we started recording we talked the most about. And again, if lots of books and papers and people have talked about and thought about evil, a lot have also thought about the devil as well. Yeah. And there's lots of different views on who Satan is. And I don't think a lot of Christians really even think about Satan very often, personally.
And I think other ones think about Satan too often.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so Ann Kristin, how about we get started with you? What do you think about her answer in this chapter?
Yeah, like I feel with an overview, it looks good.
Yes.
At first. And that she is mentioning that, the evil exists, but the devil, like, can we say that the devil exists and stuff like that? And then she begins like, it's not talked much about, and that's true, like in Christian settings, it's not talked that much about. And also that what we are thinking of the devil, that's not true. Like he's not a person with his horns and his tail and like we have seen in pictures and movies and stuff like that. So I feel that's really good. And also that she's saying... I don't know what it is in English when we like jeg forsaker djevelen and
I forsake the devil and all of his works.
But what do you call it? Like we call it forsakelsen.
Oh,
but it's not a
the
word.
Forsakening.
The forsakening.
That sounds like super metal.
Oh man.
No.
I don't. Forsakelsen. The forsakening.
The forsaking, probably.
The forsaking.
Forsaking, yeah.
It's just not something, I don't think it's anything you'd say in English.
No,
I know what you mean, but you wouldn't say it in English.
I was just wondering if you had, but
Sure.
so I feel that's good too. But I feel like she's not like actually answering like, does the devil exist?
Right.
She's not answering like yes or no or I don't know. That would be fine too. I personally I think that the devil exists, not like what we are thinking about maybe when we first think of the devil, but that he is working. He's not like the opposite of God, not at all, but but he has some power in this world. And it's like when C.S. Lewis is writing about him, I don't know in which book, but he is saying that if we give too much power to the devil or think too high of him, that's not good. But also if we don't think at him at all and don't think that he can have something to say with us or in this world, that's not good either. Then he also gets more power over us, stuff like that.
Yeah, so I think that's really good, especially that, this kind of point, she spends kind of most of her answer kind of like correcting, maybe like, not even correcting, but commiserating or like just talking about like false views of the devil.
Yeah.
Like, so does the devil exist? Well, I've seen The Exorcist, and it's like, that doesn't answer the question. But I mean, it's a good thought to think about, though, that like how the devil's portrayed in popular culture is not very accurate at all.
Right.
And those kinds of misconceptions have even kind of made their way into the church, and it's important that we correct them. So I have a dream one day, a dream sermon I want to preach called The King of Hell. And my answer to that is that God is actually the king of hell. Oh. That a lot of people think that like maybe Satan is the king of hell or something like that. And no, Satan's not in charge of hell. Satan is not the ruler of hell. He doesn't. He's not in charge of any of the business that happens there.
Right.
Hell's a place that God created, that God is in charge of, that God's in control of. Yeah. And so that's the point around that.
Yeah, I think we're good. I think it's a service to humanity to dispel sort of the medieval and sort of fantasy fairy tale version of the devil, right? With the cloven hoof and the cloven hooves and the and the horns and the pitchfork, and that it's his job to punish the impenitent for all of eternity. Like no, like that's not what's happening at all. And so we can sound silly to a culture. Like, you believe in the devil, like this red fairy being who is equal in power but opposite to God, and he's the source of all evil and wickedness in the world, and God's just trying to be good and light, and Satan is. And I think we're good. I think we're good to just say, no, that's not the scriptural picture, and even say that the picture in Scripture is a little bit complicated, because the way that we have translated and understood our Bibles throughout the millennia sort of take for granted a certain picture of Satan. And so there's maybe some study that we have to do to understand what the Bible actually is saying about Satan or about the devil, whatever he is. I think all of that is very valuable. But I think she takes a step back and says, the devil, I'm not really sure. Like, if you're talking about that exorcist, the red guy with the horns, I don't think that's a thing. Evil is what I renounce. And I think that's the renunciation, right? That's one of when you baptize somebody, you say, do you renounce the devil and all of his empty promises or all of his works? And she goes, I do that. So whether the devil is an actual guy in the universe doesn't matter that much. What I want to do is reject evil.
Right.
I think that's okay. But I think this is one of those instances where we could say about each other's position, Kari about me and about my position, and I about her position, that we don't really disagree. But I think what it does is exposes an underlying, foundational, severe, significant disagreement that we have, which is about the nature and authority of the Scriptures. So I don't think there's a great scriptural reason to say, I don't know if the devil is real. I think if you take this Scripture seriously, you have to go, well, yeah, I think the devil's a real thing, but it's not this goofy fairy tale picture. And here's what the Bible actually has to say. So I'm unenthusiastic about the move to kind of just go, the devil, I don't really have an opinion, but evil is what's important, and I renounce all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, I mean, kind of like what you said. I mean, I'll say, like, coming from a biblical perspective, I mean, it's important to acknowledge that the Bible, by comparison to like a lot of other topics, really doesn't have a whole lot to say about the person Satan, or the personal being Satan.
Less to say than some people would lead you to believe.
Yeah.
If you ask people, what do Christians believe?
Right, exactly.
Right?
Way
Yeah.
less to say than that. And depending on who you ask, like the number of passages that do have the word Satan or seem to be talking about Satan can get less and less depending on like how you read certain things
Right.
in context. And so it's important to not overemphasize the devil's role. But I think that like the answer to the question, I like what you said, where you're saying like it's a yes, no, or I don't know. And all of those are like okay. Like if someone said yes, okay. If someone said no, if someone said I don't know, I wouldn't judge anybody for giving me any of those answers. What I find kind of strange is it's like she says no with a question mark. She's like, that's not important. What I reject is evil.
Yeah.
And that's true. And there are places in Scripture, probably places I would point to where Satan is kind of the word is used to personify the forces of evil and darkness. But that's not the whole story.
Right.
That's not everything.
And I think I would be more satisfied if she took that. If she said, no, there is no person called Satan.
Sure.
Here's what's happening, and let me explain to you what the text is actually doing. And that would be a lot more satisfying for me.
Right.
I would disagree with her.
Sure.
But that answer, I think, would take a strong stand. And what I find is satisfying about this is kind of what you were talking about, Jacob. It's like the devil. I don't know. I'm not sure. I really believe in evil. But the devil, I don't know. And then she even gives us this appendix at the end of the chapter with some interesting stuff that's important for interpreting the scriptures and understanding what do scriptures say about Satan. And I think that's a good thing for Christians to read. But then she gives it no further context and then makes no conclusions based on the information.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that basically sums that up as well. The next one is actually the last question of it, but we've talked a little bit about her answer. I think her answer here is pretty good. I mean, obviously, there's I don't think this just about people I disagree with, but also people I do agree with. I would always say something like, maybe you could have said this too.
Yeah,
so
sure.
There's always things I could think about with that. But if I turn off the critical part of my brain for a second, I mean, her answer to this is good. So the question is, you say that God is merciful, but where was he during the Holocaust when several million people died? I think it's a good question.
Yeah.
It's really specific. It's kind of like asking the same question people have been asking, like, okay, if God is like this, why does this happen? Right.
That seems to be something he should have done something about.
Right. Exactly. So it's kind of the same question. But she kind of takes the whole, where was he, a little literally, and answers it in a kind of a unique way. So her answer, I'll go ahead and just explain it. Her answer is basically that God suffers with the people who were going through the Holocaust. He suffers with them. I think she's 100% right, actually. I think she's right. I think there's always going to be more that I could have found to say, but that's true. And I think that's why God takes evil and sin so seriously, is because he suffers with the victims of sin. He suffers with the victims. And in that, what I mean by that is that not as if God can be harmed in some way, but that God cares so deeply about like Ann Kristin's well-being that when she is facing persecution or suffering, God hates that. He hates that, and he is going to do something about it. It offends his justice so much that when we sin against another person who's made in the image of God, that God has to do it. He's so offended by that. His justice it compels him. He will do something about it.
Like we said earlier,
So,
that God is so holy that his eyes cannot look upon sin with indifference.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's right.
We would agree. So Kari, because she listens to us. If you did, that'd be awesome. I would love to have you on, actually.
Oh, gosh.
Sure. I think this is a good point of common ground, at least.
Yeah.
We agree God suffers with other image bearers of God, which are all human beings, when they suffer. And he suffers with them. And that's an important point in understanding God's holiness and justice and what he decides to do about sin and what he has to do about sin.
Yeah.
But yeah. Did anyone have any other comments for that? Because, I mean, that closes out this section.
I do.
Go ahead.
So I think that this is the first step toward an answer to the question of evil. So we talk about suffering, and what's the big one? What the big one in human history is the Holocaust. And incidentally, allegedly those are God's own people. So I think that is a really significant challenge to the Christian worldview. And we actually make the first part of the answer is, well, God is also grieved by all of that too. And however badly we feel about it, he feels worse and promises to judge all of that. And I think that's an important first step to make, that everything that you just said is correct. But then it makes the problem a little bit harder to answer. But then we can get into but I think it makes the problem hard to answer. We tell a really difficult story. He suffers worse than us and could have stopped it and didn't. It's like you're making it worse for yourself. I don't know how you get out of this problem. But I think starting with everything that you just said, Jacob, is essential. And then we can talk about, okay, so if God is more grieved than I am, and he has the power to stop it, put an end to it, whatever, why doesn't he? And then I think we can have a really interesting conversation about the nature of God and why we exist. And to bring us all the way back around to like the first time that Ann Kristin spoke in this episode, we can talk about sin and have a frank, clear-eyed conversation about the source and root of evil in this world. And I think to talk frankly about how I contribute to it, because it's easy for me to look at evil, terrible, horrible, wicked people in history and say, why didn't God do something about that? And it gives me the comfort of taking my eyes off of myself and admitting to and dealing with the evil. I mean, not many people have done evil like Hitler's done evil, but I have contributed to the evil in the world, and that needs to be looked at. Like, am I as holy as God that I can't look upon sin and wickedness with indifference? That means I need to look at my own sin and wickedness, and I need to judge that and expect justice to happen. And then what do I do? And it turns out the answer for me is the same. Like, it's the same. The gospel answers, what do I do? And the gospel also answers the question that was asked in this chapter, like, where was God in the Holocaust? And yeah, I'll leave that there. Maybe I won't answer it right now. I don't know. I have ideas, and I'd want to solve the math, but I think it's, like I said, I think it's this first important step to then addressing the problem in a more significant way. But then the response is all wrapped up in God's nature and the purpose of creation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know how to follow that up. So thank you for that, Cam. All right, well, this was a good talk, guys. Thank you for all your guys' insights. It was really cool. And I mean, I appreciated going through this with you. And next time, whenever part 3 comes out, we're talking about the big one, the one that Cameron, the moment I had in this episode, Cam's going to have like 5 of in the next one.
Oh,
so
gosh.
It'll be good. Not 5 of, but Cam will have a moment like that.
Do you want to
sure.
tease it? You didn't say what it was. You just said the big one.
Yeah, the big one. It's going to be her answering some questions about the Bible.
Yes.
The scriptures, which to her don't appear to be the same thing.
Oh, I don't know if that was a lie or a cliffhanger.
So we'll get into that. Definitely not a lie. I've read the book. If you want to know what that means, check us out next time. We'll see you again next week. God bless.
Thank you for listening to Word First Radio. Be sure to like, subscribe, and check us out online at wordfirst.us.